Top 5 True Creepy Stories from listserv.com. Performed by Otis Jiry. Number 5. Broadcast Interruption. In Seneca, South Carolina, an unnamed viewer is channel surfing. He stops on a broadcast of one of his old teachers reading a poem on public television. As he watches, the teacher's poem is interrupted by a cartoon, which features a typical middle-class family on a typical day. It is drawn in an overly detailed but choppy style of the sort fashionable in America in the early 90s. As the family makes small talk, a broadcast comes on the radio about how mutations are occurring, flesh is melting, and monsters are emerging from the sea. The family ignores this, despite the fact that green light is coming in through the windows and their skin is becoming jaundiced. They go about their day absorbing more and more of the green glow, which is making them more and more like mutant blobs. The cartoon ends with white text that reads, "Report to the nearest shelter immediately. Remaining at private residences is strictly prohibited." The date of November 17, 2017 is stated in the cartoon, giving the experience a sense of being prophetic. The author of this story is unknown, and the tale itself seems to have emerged sometime around 2011. As bizarre as the cartoon and its predictions are, real life has shown it's not as far-fetched as you might initially believe. After all, the American Broadcasting Channel, certainly a much bigger target than any public television channel, was once hacked by a man in a Max Headroom mask. The man left behind a much more cryptic message than the one featured in this story, and if this Seneca, South Carolina broadcast were real, it still wouldn't be quite as gory as network television broadcast called A Short Vision from 1956 of all times. There have been some weird stuff broadcast over the nation's airwaves, legitimately or otherwise. Number 4. Woman in the Oven. This story seems to date back to at least 2008. Unfortunately, the name of the original author is lost in the ether. Pity. Someone that can come up with such a bizarre and disturbing story and keep the tone so under control that it stays intriguing and believable deserves more credit. In a mundane farmhouse, a woman is found burned to death in an oven. A camera is pointed at the oven, but there is no tape inside. However, a tape, seemingly from the camera, is discovered by a well behind the house. It shows the woman coming into the shot, setting the oven, climbing inside, and then closing the door after her. After some time, violent banging and shrieking happens inside the oven, and smoke begins to emerge. But analysis of the woman in the video and the woman discovered in the oven concludes they are not the same person, based on height and stature. Cremating a human being takes 2 to 3 hours at 312 degrees Celsius, 593 degrees Fahrenheit. So it can be reasonably assumed that a commercial stove would leave her sufficiently intact for such analysis. How any of this came to be is left for the readers to attempt to imagine in their nightmares. Number 3. Barbie.avi. Dating back to at least August 9, 2009, Barbie.avi is the story of a young man who goes to a party in a largely abandoned industrial neighborhood. After being awoken early in the morning by something being thrown into a dumpster, he finds a discarded computer tower that he hopes to restore. Looking through the hard drive, he finds a video file labeled Barbie.avi. It's a video of a woman apparently being interviewed, but it's impossible to hear what she's saying over the static. It seems the woman is being verbally abused, with skin being the only word the protagonist thinks he can read on her lips. After 40 minutes of watching, he's convinced something horrible happened to her. In a shot lasting a few seconds at the end of the video, There's an abandoned home near some railroad tracks a few miles away. He and a friend go to investigate. They don't find any trace of the woman in the building. However, more significantly, they do realize that there is running water at this decrepit house out in the middle of nowhere. What could have been covered up? As hard as it is to believe that people might leave evidence of a murder on their computers before carelessly throwing them out, there are cases of people apparently being even more actively self-destructive with their murder evidence. For example, on Thanksgiving in 2012, a man in Little Falls, Minnesota, outfitted his house with a large array of cameras and microphones to capture him tormenting and then murdering 2 young people that broke into his house. Barbie.avi, with its ambiguity and subtlety, is actually much more believable than real incidents like that. Number 3. Sudden onset. Author The Little Fears is one of those horror writers who really know how to use novel terrors from real life to enhance a horrifying story's effect. Sudden onset story is simplicity itself. A 14-year-old boy with strep throat participates in a Bloody Mary ritual during a sleepover. He and his friends gather in front of a mirror, turn off the lights, and then say Bloody Mary into the mirror 3 times, hoping that a ghost will appear. We don't know what happens during the ritual, but we are told the aftermath is that the boy is now afraid of mirrors, feels fingers brushing against him at all times, and consequently lives a life of fear. What allows this to transcend being a regular spook show is that The Little Fears explains that the boy was diagnosed with pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder, a real condition where children with strep throat suddenly begin to have horrible hallucinations. Thus, this creepypasta straddles the line between the horrors of fact and fiction, and paranormal and normal, to an unusual degree. Does it really matter if there is actually no ghost of Bloody Mary haunting you when your nerves keep telling you she's got you in her fingers anyway? Number 1. Dear Abby. Kyle Mangione-Smith's story from 2012 is about a guy's descent into madness and how he mistakes obsession for love. It's told as a series of letters that a grocery store employee writes to Abby. He goes from stealing surveillance tapes of her to breaking into her apartment and destroying photos of her boyfriend. His final stroke is to kidnap her shortly after she's gone to the police and starts packing up to move out. The man locks himself, Abby, and a knife inside a rented storage garage. As he lays dying, he is comforted to know that whether she kills herself or dies of dehydration, they'll be together in death in a way they would never have had the chance of being in life. While it's an elaborate and cruel way to kill somebody, it's not much more horrifying than the real story of Roger Troy. Roger stalked and murdered Alyssa Blanton in 2010 because he'd become obsessed with her while she was a Hooters server. Such are the threats that could enter an attractive person's life at any time through no fault of their own.